All right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Mark Molina, CEO Molina Leadership and Business Development Solutions. We have a really great opportunity, great program today. Today, we're going to be speaking with Jeff Nelson, who's the General Manager of the Springfield Utility Board, and Stephen Perrick. Did I say that right, Stephen?
You did.
Stephen Perrick, who's the Chief Operating Officer of Excess Media, a high-speed internet provider. These two organizations, under the leadership of these two men, are working together to bring high speed broadband internet services to the city of Springfield. And we are very excited to discuss how this project is going. We're excited to hear how it has the developmental stages, and we're excited to hear about the planned execution phases of getting the city up and running on one congruent infrastructure on high-speed broadband services. So with that, Jeff, I'll start with you since you're the general manager of our utility provider. Talk to us a little bit, talk to those people that are going to be listening about your vision and why now.
Well, thank you, Mark. So Sub installed fiber optic fiber throughout its system to connect its critical infrastructure. That would be substations, water treatment facilities, pump stations. So we've been evolving that over time, and the fiber system was primarily installed for that purpose. And that was done in the mid-early 90s. And since that time, we've been extending surplus fiber along that system to other businesses, hospitals, school districts, the city, Willamette, others. And as the business model has evolved over time, we've also had the practice of putting in empty conduit in newer developments as those have developed, with the anticipation that down the road, there might be an opportunity to extend fiber to the home. Fast forward to 2017, we were getting inquiries from lots of providers about the ability to use subs conduit. And one of them was Excess Media. And in 2018, the sub board rolled out a net neighborhoods opportunity, which allowed providers to apply for neighborhoods which they would like to have sub own the installation. The provider would design and engineer and construct it, sub would buy it, and then lease it back to that provider for a period of time. So that's, in a nutshell, how things evolved with sub's fiber system to the net neighborhoods. And perhaps Stephen can talk about his look on the program.
Stephen?
Yeah, so thank you, Mark, and thank you, Jeff. Yeah, so the discussion started quite a while ago when we learned that Sub had made this investment maybe a decade ago or longer to put conduits in the ground, really forward thinking about allowing fiber optic connections in some developments that were done at the time. So when we learned about that, we wanted to see, what Sub's plan was. And I think it was very clear to us that Sub in the city of Springfield kind of had this idea of bringing high-speed internet services to as much of the community as possible through public infrastructure. So we started exploring that process with Sub, and as we went along, we kind of developed this net neighborhoods concept, which is really taking neighborhoods that have these empty conduits in them, installing sub-owned infrastructure, and then having a provider, an internet service provider, operate those services. So it really kind of combines the best of the public sector and the private sector. So the public sector is really great at infrastructure sort of thing, so owning infrastructure, the public interest, serving the community, and the private sector, internet providers in particular, have a lot of expertise in operating internet infrastructure. And so you put those two together, and we had I would say a pilot project, a first project under that model, and that's been really successful so far.
So tell me real quick, tell us a little bit of history of Excess Media. Where are you from? Did you originate here? What's your vision for your organization?
Sure. The story for us starts back in 2001. My dad owned the company. He started the company. And it's really as simple as we lived in Junction City. There were no high-speed internet providers. So this is before Comcast. This is before Quest, now CenturyLink. And we just wanted internet at our house. My dad was a kind of an early adopter tech person. He was in the IT field. And he made a deal with the city of Junction City to put some antennas up on the iconic water tower. We got it to our house, and it turned out other people wanted service too. So he started the business in providing wireless in Junction City, and then it spread from there. So the next place was Harrisburg. But you can't get to Harrisburg directly from Junction City with wireless because we've got the Willamette River running between them. So we had to go off the Coburg Hills. And it turns out when you stand on the Coburg Hills, you can see a lot of area. And so that's how the rural internet part of the company was born. About 6 or 7 years ago, we started getting into the fiber business, so offering fiber services in more urban areas. But our focus has always really been on community and creating opportunity for others. And so I think, public partnership or collaboration with Sub has really continued that. About 3 years ago, my dad was ready for retirement. And so we sold to Online Northwest, which is a company in McMinnville that has a really strong history of doing a lot of the same types of things that we do. So school build-outs, fiber to the home build-outs, a real strong focus on creating opportunity in rural community. And our CEO is Kathy Tate. And that combination, a merger of resources has really allowed us to do even more now than we were able to do even 5 years ago. And yeah, that's where we are today. We're rapidly growing. We're very busy. I think the global pandemic has highlighted just how critical internet is, and people are reconsidering internet in their homes and their businesses. And I think there are a lot of providers in this community, us included, who are stepping up to help out as much as we can. So that's our journey. I was the first employee hired back in 2007, and now we have a lot of them.
Very good. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
That's a good American story of hard work and having dreams and being able to pass things on to the ones you love and expand that. The economic impact, not just for the employees, but for the communities around the Eugene Springfield area, the outer areas or rural areas, as you just described, now have the ability to tap into high-speed broadband services. So very wonderful story. Good to hear that.
Thank you.
Jeff, now Sub is well over 70 years old. You are the fifth general manager they've ever had. You've been there over 20 years. When did this become a serious endeavor? Not that it wasn't serious before, but the time is now for you and the board. When did that realization come, and how did you make the conclusion, the board, whoever made those decisions, that Excess Media was going to be that conduit for helping you achieve that goal of high-speed broadband internet to the city of Springfield?
Yeah, so I've been in this role as general manager since 2012, and we've tackled a number of things through that time, but I think it was around 2016, we were having elevated discussions with internet providers. We were seeing a lot of activity and interest, and so the idea had the genesis there, and we've really appreciated the effort that's Excess Media has taken up to this point with one particular neighborhood. The program design is open to any internet provider with some qualifications. You have to have a license to operate within the city of Springfield. It's kind of the opening the door to the conversation. And then to be eligible under the program, which Sub would essentially finance over a longer period of time, The neighborhood needs to be within the city limits, and we need to provide electric and water to that neighborhood, the entities getting service. The reason for that is that the telecommunication business line is a subset of Sub's core business, which is electric and water service. And we want to make sure that the customers that are primarily helping finance this liftoff of this opportunity are the ones that benefit from it.
And how long now? At what point did you make the decision? Did Sub, you, the board, make the decision that the time is now? We're gonna seize this moment now.
That was 2018. So I had gone to the board and asked them to see if they're willing to commit up to $1 million for additional infrastructure. And that opened the door for the neighborhoods application process, which allows multiple providers to compete for the same neighborhood. And so the board did take that step and approved the arrangement with Access Media on one particular neighborhood. And there's still outstanding funds that the board had previously committed that are available for additional telecommunications opportunities.
And so, as a general manager of Sub, you feel like things are going well according to your expectations and timeline?
Well, everything's a learning experience. A lot of times what we try to explore is proof of concept. So the community has an interest to leverage the public assets to promote private competition. And sometimes the private providers have their own business model and their own vision, and they succeed in the best way they want to. It really is up to them to find out if there's a good fit in working with Sub in the city. They're welcome to independently go off and install their own fiber network or lease dark fiber from Springfield Utility Board for their own network. It's just the opportunity to have some last mile infrastructure publicly controlled and owned is something that the City of Springfield and Sub have been interested in.
Okay, very good. Now, I understand in the Ambleside neighborhood, just before the 4th of July, you've had the first connection. Yes, is that correct?
Yes.
All right. And so, Stephen, talk to us a little bit about that. What was the construction phase like, going in, getting things installed? How do you feel as far as Access Media is concerned that process went?
Yeah, so I think there were a lot of things that we've learned throughout the first process. So this is kind of the first public-private partnership of this kind that we can really find anywhere. Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot of things to work through. So once we got approval from the board, there was a process to get what the agreement should look like. And so that took some time. And then we finally got to construction. And of course, that took a little bit longer than we wanted to. But I would say all in all, we're really happy. There was a HOA meeting recently, about 3 weeks ago or so. And, I just asked feedback from the community about how they felt the construction process went, what was the impact on their lives, on their homes, that sort of thing. And everybody was positive. There wasn't a single negative comment. So I think, if you look out from a 30,000-foot view at the entire process, we're really happy. People didn't feel like they're impacted. They're really excited that they're being connected to public infrastructure, that they have an opportunity to get extremely fast, the fastest available low-cost internet service. So I think when you look at it from that perspective, it's a win. The phases for us were initially, gathering interest. Who's interested in this? We knew we had a great service to offer, and the opportunity was unique. So that was really positive. Once we did that, we had our engineering and design. Then we started construction. Drilling main lines. So that's putting in conduits underground in the sidewalk areas between homes. And then we had the installing conduit from the homes from the sidewalk to the houses. We call those laterals. So yeah, it was get all the conduit in the ground, then pull all of the fiber through, then set all of your pedestals and vaults and splice everything together and install your electronics, and now you're ready to go. I can't forget about the documentation phase. There's documentation as well. So you put all of those things together. This time it took us about, I want to say 9 months from start to finish, maybe just under that, from when we kind of did our first heavy piece of equipment in the neighborhood until completion. Um, Imagine the next, after all of this learning, the next opportunity for the next ISP that comes in will be much faster.
Mhm.
But yeah, we're really happy. People felt great about it. The only thing we wish is that we could have moved a little bit quicker.
So you just gave a fairly technical, not too technical, but still technical explanation somewhat of how it's done. Um, I'm assuming you had to present those plans to sub for approval, or did it have to go to the city for approval?
Yeah, so most of the work has been with sub. So we did have to go to the city for things like permits. So filing those, we even had to involve eWeb and other utilities at some point because you're drilling in close proximity to them. So there's a lot of interagency coordination that's done, especially in a place where a lot of the utilities are already underground. But in terms of the plans and those sort of things, that was stuff that we worked with sub on. So we've worked closely with their engineers, their water and power team, about how these sort of projects are designed, how they're laid out, and that sort of stuff, not just for this project, but to assist in greenfield, so new developments that are happening.
Mhm.
Sub is taking a really proactive approach in connecting the community. And I think there's been a lot of info sharing on both sides, but there's all sorts of things. So, for example, you can't just pick a vault. You have to have a specific type of vault that is easily replaceable if it gets damaged. So, there's an approved materials list that you kind of co-create. So again, sub isn't in the business of providing internet service to others. So there's a lot of product that they're not aware of. So there's a lot of sharing that goes back and forth. And then there's a lot of things that sub does do. So putting infrastructure underground and vaults and those sort of things. So it's really, I would say, a collaborative process. But yeah, and it worked really well. We were really happy to work with them.
So if the internet stops working in Ambleside, hypothetically, who's responsible, sub or excess media?
Ultimately, it's excess media. So if the problem is in the neighborhood in particular, then it's excess media's responsibility to fix it. So there's fiber that runs, so sub has fiber all over the place, like Jeff kind of alluded to earlier. So if there's an issue getting to the neighborhood, then it's possible it's with sub's power. Maybe they have a pole issue or a down line in the winter. But if it's specific to that neighborhood, excess media and any internet provider in the net neighborhoods would be responsible for fixing that. And that kind of makes a lot of sense if you think about it. We installed the infrastructure, we're operating the infrastructure, we know where it is, sub knows where it is too, but it's much easier for us to go in and say somebody dug a hole and hit the fiber cable, and we know exactly where everything can splice. We can respond quickly to that sort of thing. And it affects the service that we're providing ultimately to the residents in the neighborhood. So, yeah.
Very good. Jeff, what is or what are some of the next objectives for sub in this process of getting high-speed broadband to the city of Springfield?
Yeah, there are a lot of moving parts, and sub wants to position itself to collaborate with the private sector, but also, if we need to, just get out of the way and let them do what they do best. So we're still exploring and having lots of conversations with the private sector. We're having more conversations with the City of Springfield in terms of their understanding what their priorities and where they would like sub to focus attention on. So there's been discussion about looking at the downtown area. Of course, we still have the net neighborhoods opportunity out there, and so we'll see how that unfolds with providers looking at other neighborhoods in Springfield. We continue to have the ability to have last mile fiber installed to commercial buildings. We've had that product for a number of years, so that's still an ongoing product. We're looking at more opportunities for spreading access to broadband and fiber. So we're wanting to pay more attention and continue to put effort towards making sure that the strategy that Sub's putting forward is accessible to multiple demographics within the city of Springfield. So we've talked to providers about Sub providing financial support and resources towards extending fiber to, say, limited income multifamily housing.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't had liftoff on anything related to that, but those are the types of conversations that we really encourage providers to have with us.
So what did you learn, Jeff, regarding about the infrastructure of Sub and the leadership of Sub? Stephen mentioned working with your water and power teams, your engineers. What did you learn about capacity, and what did you learn about what you didn't know?
Oh, there's still a lot I don't know, and I appreciate Stephen and others educating me and being patient with me. So one of the things that Sub's, again, going back to Sub's primary focus is electric and water, and so we're sized for those types of services. The telecommunications side, we have resources for that, but they're much more limited. In order for us to scale up and do things in a broader and a rapid pace, then we would have to figure out the resources we need to do that. But I've really been appreciative of staff being behind this. My coworkers have been supportive of it, but also kind of raising the red flag. You know, we need to focus on our core business while still putting effort towards telecommunications.
All right, very good. Now, Stephen, talk a little bit, if you can, about what is other areas of interest you feel like you could bring, just as an expert in your field, because I'm sure there's other organizations that are probably in the bidding process. But what are some of the things that other neighborhoods that would want this high-speed broadband, what are some of the accessibility issues that are concerned or what you look for?
Yeah, so that's a great question. There's a lot that goes into, I think, determining whether or not a neighborhood is a good candidate. Certainly there are limited funds, so we can't go everywhere that we would like to. So, you know, we talked a lot about those conduits that are in the ground. There's a limited amount of them. And also not all of them are, I would say, they're in various stages of completeness. So you may have one neighborhood that has all of the infrastructure that you could ask for already in the ground. And then you have another one that has a lot of gaps. And so we need to fill those gaps. And that can be quite expensive, especially depending on where that area is. So maybe we need to cross a railroad, or maybe it's next to the river and the ground is really cobbly and rocky, and it's really hard to drill through that. So there are kind of those sorts of challenges. I think in general, you know, again, our company is really interested in creating opportunity. So our focus is always on the disadvantaged, and that could be rural communities who don't have access to high-speed internet. Or have limited access, and it could be people who are at an economic disadvantage. It could be just a whole bunch of things. So we kind of look at all of the maybe all of the areas of opportunity, I would say, from a physical assets, so what's in the ground, and then we kind of assess where those are at. And then after that, we take a look and say, what community can we do the biggest amount of good in? And I think that's kind of where we're at now is in the what next. So, you know, assessing what's in the ground and and then where can we have the biggest impact, and where does the community frankly want us to build. So this isn't just we build somewhere and then hope people will come. We really want feedback from the community that they're interested in these kinds of services. They see the value in being connected to public infrastructure.
Mhm.
And I think, Jeff brought up apartment complexes, more dense living. And I think, that's a really interesting place to look at too, because you can have a really significant impact in a very small footprint. So I think we're kind of looking at all of those opportunities and working, I think, with the city and then also sub about maybe they have their own priorities. They do have their own priorities. I think they happen to be in alignment with us, but yeah, I think we would be a bit naive if we just said, "Hey, the ground looks good here. We're going to build it there." There's a lot of other things that come into play, and we're taking those into account.
Yeah, I think that's really important, especially for the residents to understand that it's not this arbitrary process. There is a critical thinking, there is planning, there are these external factors that have to be in place for this to be successful.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, one thing that's important to understand with the project is the ask of the community is very minimal. Obviously, we're going to have drills out there, we're going to have equipment out there, we're going to be moving dirt, but we try to put the landscaping and all that stuff back as close to what it was. But the neighborhood is not bearing any of the cost of this project. It's really on the internet provider who's doing that. So we're going up to these homes and saying, "Hey, would you like to be connected to public infrastructure? There's no cost. You don't have to pay an installation fee to do that. Would you like to be connected? And there's no obligation even to get connected to service." So that's really good. Like every home has the opportunity to be connected to power and water, right? Is connected to power and water. We want kind of that same feel for the fiber infrastructure. And then, hey, if you choose to get connected and you want service, that's available to you as well. All of those things have no installation fee. There's just the monthly service fee, and the internet provider's bearing all of that cost. So sub bears the initial cost, and then there's a payback to the provider, or payback from the provider, I should say.
That's good. Now, Jeff, you mentioned that you spoke to the board and they agreed to support the project with $1 million. How's that money holding up? How much longer can you move forward with only $1 million? Because I suspect this type of project would cost a whole lot of money.
Yes, my understanding is that the Ambleside Net neighborhood will use up about a third of that $1 million commitment. So the board directed that $1 million conceptual funding availability towards both residential and business purposes. So we're not just focused on residential, we're looking at opportunities to look at economic development and ways that we can improve the experience for public infrastructure and interfacing that with the commercial and industrial customers of Springfield.
So what's your relationship, or what's the communication process you have to have with the city to accomplish some of the things you just mentioned?
Yeah, so we work with Courtney Griesel in the Economic Development Department at the City of Springfield, as well as the leadership team, the elected officials, the city manager. They're part of this conversation, which is ongoing, and it's somewhat organic as we're trying to figure out, again, the priorities that the city has. But the economic development team at the City of Springfield is our conduit to understand what's the level of interest and activity in certain areas of the city. The city may have parts of the city that they're wanting to try to develop, and so we can explore what's the best way to poise for future infrastructure in those areas.
Well, that's encouraging to hear that this broad range of leadership collective, so to speak, establishing priorities so that money isn't wasted. It's good to hear that. It's good to hear, I live here, I have a home here in Springfield, and that makes me happy to hear you're not just saying, all right, let's go drill a hole over here at this 42nd and Main hypothetically and see if it works. It's well thought out, and you're managing resources very well. Now, for excess media, Stephen, what would you, if you could dictate this pace and this project, where would you like to go next with this infrastructure?
That's secretive. No, I'm just kidding. Internet providers are notoriously competitive, myself included. But no, I think there were a lot of lessons learned from the first project. Again, just down to what pedestals are we going to want to standardize on, and throughout the entire process, there was this really forward-thinking direction. So we could look at this as an isolated project, or we could look at this as something that's a sustainable model. And in a pilot, it's really important to think about not just the challenges that you may have on this project, but other challenges you may have on future projects. And that's part of what slowed our pace down a bit, was that forward thinking, like, let's have a long-term vision and a long-term plan for what we're putting in the ground. Because once it goes in the ground, it's there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not to say that you can't make changes in the future, but a lot of thought and attention to detail needs to be given. So I think the next project would be much faster, since a lot of those decisions have already been made. Certainly hope so. And yeah, I think, as Chuck said, about a third of the money has been spent for Ambleside, and I think we'd like to continue exploring other areas of interest, both to the city sub and excess media, and connect that. So the money's available. It does a lot of good, and I think it makes sense to put it to some use. So I think we want to move fairly quickly on things now that we've got a plan established. We didn't want to do anything in the middle of an existing project because there are a lot of lessons learned. And frankly, we're still doing that project. We've got maybe 30 or so homes connected at this point, with many more to be done. And I think as we come out of the project and towards the very end of this and all of the steps, we'll be looking at other areas and possibly submitting applications, definitely submitting applications.
Very good. Well, I won't ask you any trade secrets about what your plans or your hopes are next, because I understand the whole competitive edge. But I do have a minor question. You mentioned the term now pedestal more than once. For someone like me who doesn't know anything about what you do, what does that mean?
Yeah, so the fiber is very fragile. They're little tubes of glass that are wrapped in plastic, very small things, so a quarter of an inch maybe. So those have to be protected. And also the tubes have to be fused together so that that maybe tube A goes to house A and tube B goes to house B. So all of those tubes of glass get fused together, and those need to go into protected areas. So you have vaults, which are basically these concrete boxes that go underground. But in some places, we didn't have room to put vaults everywhere. So you have to remember that this is an existing neighborhood where things have been established for 10, 15 years. Mm-hmm. Plants are growing, all of those things. And so, we can't set something that's 2 feet by 3 feet in the ground. There's just no room. Mm-hmm. So then you have an above ground structure. It's maybe 8 to 12 inches in diameter, and it sticks up out of the ground. And so we've seen those when you drive around through neighborhoods or around town, those little enclosures that stick up above ground, and those are called pedestals.
Oh, okay.
Use those mostly where you have a limited footprint. And so if you pop one of those off and you look inside, you'll see a whole bunch of fiber coiled up, and you might see a little enclosure inside of there, and that's where we connect all the fibers together.
So one other question for you, Stephen. As things get faster, does that mean the fiber optics get smaller?
Well, that's a good question. So there's this idea that things can either get faster or smaller, and typically, you look at technology and they do both, but there's a whole math equation about that. So you look at computers in the beginning, and they were huge and very slow, and now we've got computers that were or cell phones that are more powerful than what they sent people to the moon on. So yes, fiber has changed. So the physical fiber, the tubes of glass, you can get more of them in a smaller area now. But really the secret sauce is the electronics, so the things you connect on either side of the glass. So fiber's been around for a very long time, but the price has only come down significantly recently. And as technology increases, if you want speeds to go faster, you just swap out the hardware. So when fiber first started, you would connect something on either side and you would shoot a laser across them. Well, as technology evolved, they realized, hey, if you look at the rainbow, the colors of the rainbow, they're all these different colors, right? Roy G. Biv, we learned in school. Well, maybe you can do that over fiber too. So then they started learning that you can actually send all these different colors or wavelengths across fiber, and each one of them can have its own channel and its own speed. And so as they just continue to iterate on technology, it's faster and faster and faster. So that's one of the things about fiber that's kind of amazing, and why it's so advanced and you see it going in all over the place is the glass tubes itself stay the same, and all you have to do is swap out either side. Whereas a lot of older technology, it's the cables. When it was the copper wires, you'd always have to swap out the copper to be able to take advantage of the next technology. So that's the big advantage to fiber. And it only started making sense in the last 10, 15 years as costs have come down and more people have used it.
Oh, okay, very good. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Now, Jeff, you said that getting the high-speed broadband services would be to customers of Sub that are on both water and electric. What is the projected payback? What's the cost analysis?
So we have different opportunities in the fiber business line. So it's under the Springfield Infinet umbrella of services, which is commercial, residential, and public, and everything in between. The cost of extending infrastructure to residences, that last mile, is one of the more expensive components for a fiber system. And in recognizing that, one of the strengths of Sub and being a public entity is that we do have the capacity to stretch out those repayment periods over time. The current estimate and how the Ambleside application was structured was that about 60% of the cost that Sub incurred would be recovered in the first 10 years. And then after that, we're hoping that there's still interest from internet providers to use that public infrastructure, and we would then be able to allow them to lease that after that 10-year period too.
Oh, okay. Well, that's interesting. Now, that model that you're mentioning, as far as internet providers leasing that, there's not been any pushback on that. Everyone thinks that's a good plan.
In terms of the providers leasing, that's how the program was structured with Net Neighborhoods and how it was presented to the Sub board. There would be a payback period over time for, in this case, specifically focusing on the pilot for residential net neighborhoods.
Now, this concept of residential net neighborhoods, this terminology, where did that come from? Did this come out of committee? This was part of already the historical work of Sub and its board and the creation stage of it to get internet there. Where did this come from?
Well, different cities have looked at connectivity to residential and businesses in their communities, but really when we were looking at the conversations with the internet providers and the existing infrastructure that Sub had in place, there was interest in Ambleside and other neighborhoods that had some infrastructure. So neighborhood came out of that conversation.
Oh, okay. And so if it's residential and commercial, is it safe to assume that that we have what's necessary to get the fiber optics to commercial locations?
So as Stephen mentioned, Sub has fiber around the city of Springfield, but there are elements where we just don't have connectivity at this time. So you probably could get access, but it may not be over Sub's fiber. It may be over a different party's fiber.
Okay. All right. So, Stephen, for your position, Excess Media, what you do, your expertise, what the way Jeff just explained that, what would that look like for customers, commercial clients that want media, but you might have to go through someone else? What would that look like to bring that to pass?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different ways to get service. So if you think about, at your house, if you move into a new home
Mhm.
and you want internet service there, you could pick up the phone and you could call one of the main incumbent providers who are in town. So, Comcast or CenturyLink, right? And that exists for commercial as well. However, there's this push from a lot of local providers to offer faster speeds, more competitive pricing. And so people have a lot more options now than they did even 5 years ago in Springfield. Um, and one of those ways is through this public infrastructure model that Jeff has been talking about. So Sub has all of their substations connected, for example. Every school in Springfield School District is connected. So if you imagine fiber running between all of those places and others, the hospitals, they pass a lot of buildings. And so maybe a business picks up the phone and they call a local provider like Access Media and they say, hey, this public infrastructure thing, it sounds like something I'm interested in. And then it's at that point a dialogue between the customer, Access Media, and Sub. So we take a look at their infrastructure and we see if they have anything nearby. Oftentimes it requires construction. So we use Sub's backbone and we extend Sub's backbone into their building or into their business and then provide services over that. So one of the advantages of public fiber, the real big benefits to the community is when you pick up the phone and you call one of the incumbent providers, they build their infrastructure into your building. So you may pay high monthly fee, you may pay a construction fee, but you're locked into that provider. You don't really have any choices unless you want to make another big financial decision in the future to switch. Once you're connected to public infrastructure, there are a number of providers who use that. I would say at least 10, maybe even more than 10. And so once that public infrastructure is in your building, you now have unlocked the ability to get service from a number of internet providers, not just Access Media. So there's some advantages there. And as you can imagine, most internet providers aren't super fond of that idea. I mentioned earlier that we're highly competitive. And so the idea of building your own fiber into that building and now nobody else can use it is attractive to most providers.
Mhm.
But this sub model is again really different. It's community focused. It's giving you options. You're connected to this public asset that is going to be there, and again, it's low cost. The way that Sub has priced out their infrastructure and their willingness to work in a public-private environment has really enabled providers like us to look at these differently than really has ever been looked at before. So I would just say they need to pick up the phone and they need to call a local ISP and start that dialogue. And Sub isn't everywhere. Not everywhere makes sense, but if you think about schools, you think about substations, hospitals, and other critical infrastructure, Sub has fiber running between those. So Sub covers a wide geographical area in Springfield.
So
Does that answer your question?
it does. And
Right.
I want to verify or confirm that the infrastructure is there to reach schools, substations, hospitals. It's there.
Correct. It's already there. It's already on the poles. It's already underground, and those are just a few areas. It's in other areas as well.
Okay,
If you
very
think about all of the businesses and homes that it passes, those are all opportunities. Again, not every one of them is, going to be available. Some have challenges like crossing railroads. In our industry, we're kind of afraid of railroads. Um, but there are challenges, but certainly because of this investment the Sub has made in the community already, it enables a lot of these businesses to be connected. And I think Sub has really been a leader in the idea of this public-private partnership and enabling community connectivity through their public infrastructure.
very good. Jeff, I have an off question for you. Some parts of Springfield are under sub water electrical, some are under sub water with different electric company providers. Why is that? How does that happen?
Oh, this might take a long time, but I'll try to be brief. For water service, the way that the state legislature has set up Oregon law is that when a city expands into an area with that property coming into the city limits, then there's some transition for the existing water provider to transition assets and facilities to the city water provider. On the electric side, the legislature is approached somewhat differently through a different route. But one of the mechanisms they have is the Oregon Public Utility Commission can approve service territory. And so if the Oregon PUC has approved service territory, there may be parts of a city that are served by a different electric provider.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, that's people like me, laymen, we live here. We wouldn't have known that. That's why I wanted to make sure I asked that question today. So I appreciate the answer. So I have one final question for the both of you. Stephen, I'll start with you. There's a lot of people that are going to be hearing about Excess Media now that they have you, and there's a lot of people that aren't going to know who you are. What would you like to say to the residents of Springfield or commercial property owners of Springfield, clients that you would like to bring your services to? What would you like to say to them? What is Excess Media's commitment to them if they are able to provide services?
Sure. No, I appreciate the question and the opportunity. So I should have been more prepared. I think that we're local, and local has, I think, a couple of different meanings to some people. So some people really want to support local business, and others have concerns about the quality of local, especially when it comes to trusting your business with a smaller internet provider. And what I'll say is that, we have a really strong network, a very trusted network. So the city of Eugene, the airport, the hospitals, major medical providers, the sheriff, the county, they're all using our service. The UWeb is using our service. We serve a significant portion of downtown Eugene with our service. So we have a very strong, trusted network. But more than that, more than being local, we care. I hope that came across. So we care about our community. We care about the disadvantaged. We want to get services out to people who don't have adequate service. Our mission is all about creating opportunity for others. We like the idea in the commercial field where we want our internet to be like the electricity, like the power. You walk in, you flip a light switch, and the light always comes on. We don't want people to think about their internet. We want it to just work. And as they innovate and they come up with new ideas, internet is not something that is a concern of theirs. They just know it's capable of doing whatever they need it to be done. Trust is incredibly important for us. We love to build trust with our customers. We love to build trust with our community. And we're a very giving organization. We provide free service to Kids Sports, Homes for Good, Cahoots, Whitebird, and many others. And really that comes down to that community as well. If we can help, we feel we have an obligation to help. So we're different. We're a different ISP. We're local. We care about you. And we're also the fastest and the lowest cost. So there's some cherry on top. So I would encourage people to give us a call, just to have a conversation. We're real people. We live here. And I think that you would be surprised at what we can offer.
Very good. Jeff, what about you? You're the general manager of Sub. You hold a highly trusted position in the city and the community. People believe that when you make some of the statements you've made today, that you are indeed 100% working in the best interest of the residents of Springfield. What's your commitment? What's your final words of encouragement for this interview regarding the progress and this process and progress from Sub to the clients to the residents, and your commitment to ensuring that everything is done to the highest quality standard?
Hey, thanks for the opportunity. One of the things that's important to recognize and I want to assure the customers of Sub and the community is that there is a lot of competition out there, not just with internet providers, but also technology. We have 5G technology, we have satellite technology. Both those technologies in different forms. 5G is evolving, but satellite has been around for a while. And we're seeing even that technology become more enhanced and more competitive over time. So while fiber may be a solution, and it might be the right solution for a particular home or business, there's going to be other opportunities and other technologies, and Sub's infrastructure supports that too. We provide opportunities for small cell service to attach to our poles. We're required to under open access under the federal law. So the doors, open for business in Springfield for lots of technologies, different internet providers, different business models, and I want to just share that I think that's a value that's shared by all of Springfielders in terms of we want to be open and ready for business for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Well, I appreciate that. Open and ready for business is a priority for economic development here in the city. I want to thank you both, gentlemen, for your time. Ladies and gentlemen, we've had Stephen Parrick, the Chief Operating Officer of Excess Media, and Jeff Nelson, the General Manager of Springfield Utility Board, here today discussing the project of bringing high-speed broadband internet to Springfield and increasing service capacity. Gentlemen, thank you for your time, both of your wonderful answers, great expertise. You shed a lot of positive light, a lot of constructive information for how things are going. And if there's anything we can do for you, please reach out to us. And we look forward to this ongoing project and the success of both Excess Media, Springfield Utility Board, and bringing high-speed broadband internet to all the residents of the city. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Appreciate it.
Yes, so have a good day.
Take care.
You too.